At this point, every information portal is saturated with mindfulness content. But this show is a unique, unusual, curious take on mindfulness. Some of what you hear will be completely new to you. Let's dive in and take a look at the nature of the aware mind. I invite you to deepen your awareness so that you may be liberated and inspired.
We are here with Sarah Vallely, mindfulness teacher, coach, and author. Sarah has been teaching meditation and mindfulness for the past 2 decades, training and certifying others to teach mindfulness. Sarah is the author of 4 books. Her latest book is titled Tame, Soothe, Dwell, the 55 Teachings of TSD Mindfulness. On today's episode, we have a special treat where Sarah and I discuss our own personal practices as they are right now. I'm Jacob DeRusset. I'm here with Sarah Vallely. Sarah, how are you?
I'm doing great, Jacob. Thank you. Today, we are going to talk about how to get started with your mindfulness practice. What do you think, Jacob? What do you think is a big challenge for people for getting into or starting their meditation practice?
Convincing somebody that there's even a reason enough to start. I think that some people that I talk to don't even know how to begin. They're like, or they don't even see the reason that a person should do that. So yeah, I think that's a huge thing that I run into a lot with people.
You had said something about people not knowing what the point is, why it would work. Is this just going to be a waste of time? Mindfulness practice takes, number one, time, which is really valuable to people. And then it also takes knowledge and understanding, which those two could be barriers for a lot of people.
What would you say to somebody that you're having a conversation with someone and you're like, I meditate, and then they're like, yeah, I don't do that. I had talked to somebody the other day. They're like, yeah, I don't do that. I don't know anything about it. I've never done anything like that. And they kind of like said it in a dismissive way of like, yeah, I'm tired of hearing about it. I want to move on with the conversation kind of thing. So how do you engage with that?
So I don't know, maybe it's because people know what I do. People don't say that stuff around me, but if that were to happen, probably would go to my geeky side and maybe share the plethora of research that is out there that shows that mindfulness meditation reduces depression, reduces anxiety, it reduces feelings of overwhelming grief, and it helps us with healing. So unless they're anti-science, I don't know. I mean, the science is definitely behind it. Have you heard of this idea that 90% of our thoughts that we have today are the same as the thoughts that we had yesterday? So we're only working with about 10% new thoughts every day. And I think that for some people is hard to digest and admit to. It's like, wow, that doesn't seem right. If you sit and practice mindfulness and be really aware of how repetitive our thoughts are, how we are thinking an exact thought that we thought yesterday, and you have that awareness, and you can really see that that's true. And why is that helpful? It's helpful because if we realize that that's happening, we're thinking the same thoughts pretty much that we were yesterday, then we can take a different perspective on those thoughts and think about what is the validity to some of these thoughts. Because if we're thinking them every day, we might want to really investigate to see, how true they are, because sometimes we're just thinking things that aren't true and they're causing us stress and they're getting us into bad situations. And also, how helpful is it? If you're ruminating about the same thing or in the same way on multiple days, is that a waste of your brain power, right? So when you become more aware of what you're thinking on a daily basis, you start to realize how maybe some of it could be redirected to something that's going to be more successful, more productive, more bringing you to some more peace.
I think of something that I heard Joseph Goldstein, that I think his teacher, Ajahn Chah, had said at one point, and it was, if you're curious about understanding your mind, then sit down and observe it. Do you ever do stuff and you're like, why did I do that? Why have I saw this coming a mile away and I behaved this way, and then here's the result, and I don't know why I didn't adjust for it. And that unawareness of why you're doing what you're doing goes away when you observe it. And you don't have to do anything other than you sit down with your eyes closed. And the reason, so from that Huberman podcast that we had listened to, one of the things was the reason you close your eyes is because you can pay better attention. You just have less input coming in, that your awareness of your thoughts increases when you close your eyes, which is why people close their eyes. It's easier to focus. Okay, so somebody said to me, like, I don't know about meditating. And then I say to them, okay, yeah, so do you ever do things and you're very unsure why? You're not aware of why you're doing it. Yeah, oh yeah, all the time. I'll do something. And I'm like, okay, so if you want to improve that, a really easy way to improve this unawareness that you have, one is journaling, actually. Journaling is great for understanding your thoughts and writing those down. I think that's a good thing to do. But instead, what I like to do is, and I think this would work for someone very well, is to sit preferably on the floor so you can pay better attention than it on a couch. Just sit on the floor any way you want that feels comfortable for 20 minutes and just watch all the thoughts that come in your mind and just start develop a relationship with them. Mm-hmm. Don't think about them, but just to develop a relationship with them. Then the next day, put a timer on for 20 minutes, stand in a room that's 10 feet across and walk as slowly as you can stand it, just as slow as you can stand it. And then just observe what that's like. And that's it.
You said that closing your eyes helps to become more aware of your thinking. Yeah, I think that's definitely true because the visual stimuli can make that a little bit more complicated. Meditating with eyes open is really key for a lot of people. And this would be a little bit different type meditation. So what Jacob was just talking about, just observing whatever thoughts come up, and that's called open awareness meditation, which I'll go into more detail in a minute. But the other type of meditation is single pointed focus. And if you are doing that type of meditation and you are a very visual person, if you close your eyes to say, listen to your breath and you're a very visual person, you might actually have a lot of images that jump up in your mind's eye that are distracting. I struggled with this several years ago. A way to address that is to meditate with your eyes open, looking at an object. And that will help because if you're such a visual person, then you're staying with the visual approach and that's your concentration. And so then you're not distracted by these other visual images that come into your mind. And if you do that, I always use something from nature because I've tried in the past to look at maybe a candlestick or a statue or something like that. And if I get into a really deep meditation, the thoughts that were used to create that statue start to distract me. So if I use something from nature, there's no thought that went into it. It's just nature. And you'd mentioned journaling. I'm with you. I mean, yes, journaling is great. It can help us really work some things out. It's a nice way to unpack things. It's a nice way to get in touch with what's going on, but it can also kind of get us activated in the mind and get us more activated, which is kind of like the opposite to what we're doing. So it's definitely not a replacement for meditation. Yeah. So I like this idea of starting out by sitting down and just like Jacob said, just noticing what's going on in your psyche. What are these thoughts that are coming through? And that's called open awareness meditation. And a way that works really well for me is to imagine a screen, and that screen is just where all my thoughts are coming about. I mean, that's kind of a metaphor. It's not literal, but sometimes that can help to just say what's coming on your screen. That's open awareness meditation. And it could be not just thoughts. It might be a sensation comes up. It might be a sound that comes up in your environment. You're aware of whatever comes up. And then the next day, switching it up a little bit and doing some walking meditation, which is you're walking really, really slowly, like Jacob said. But I teach mindfulness classes and I've worked with a lot of beginners. And sometimes starting with open awareness can be overwhelming. Takes a certain level of skill to be able to notice what thoughts are coming into your consciousness. So I found that with some people, the single point of focus, starting out with that can be better for them. So going along with what Jacob was saying, even if it's just 10 minutes a day and choosing something to focus on, whether it's your breath, details of your breath, or physical sensations in your body, the details of physical sensations in your body, or sounds, and just noticing all those details. The detail part is what helps keep us concentrated and build our concentration. What would you say about people who are challenged, or do you get challenged in your practice with concentration?
If your idea is, okay, I want to improve my concentration level, then it would be like, okay, you should do Vipassana. I would say that doing some amount of Vipassana in the beginning is crucial to just be aware that you have a very difficult time concentrating, whether you knew it or not, because you may have thoughts about why you aren't concentrated rather than just not knowing that you're not concentrated. So doing some amount of just basic breath focused awareness just to see what it's like to return your attention is very crucial. Otherwise, your attention will get pulled from whatever it is that you're doing or trying to do or not do, and you won't know it. Again, it depends on what your goal is with all of this stuff. Mine is doing a practice that brings in a lot of awareness to the ground of being, right? And then able to really let go of clinging to thoughts. Mm-hmm. That's what I'm interested in. So that's why I'm more partial to like a Dzogchen type approach. It's this notion of like, you were born with Buddha nature, right? Like how do you know you're already not enlightened? Like awareness is perfectly present at all times, and it's there. And it's just our inability to relax into that more often is the focus. Versus a Vipassana approach is like from my understanding, deeper awareness of the fact that we are just thinking and our thoughts are just being manufactured without our control to that, right? But it's an attention based. So it's your ability to pay attention versus a Dzogchen is more of a relaxed awareness of.
So my background is in Vipassana. And I think what's important is people who begin their meditation practice, they really get caught off guard by their inability to concentrate. And it becomes an issue for them. And for a lot of people, it's why they don't ever meditate again. In my own practice, and when I teach, it doesn't matter if we're concentrated or not. What matters is, what do we do when we're not? Or what do we do about that phenomenon? What do we do about losing concentration? And I think that's really key. So this might be helpful for people is, what are some things that we do when we practice, when we notice that we are losing concentration? One thing that I think is helpful is self-compassion. Sometimes we need to just tell ourselves, it doesn't matter that we're not concentrated right now. Maybe we've had a really busy day and that's what's going on. So other things that we might do are to remember the ebb and flow of the practice, right? It is not about just staying focused on one thing the whole time. It is about this ebb and flow that we're focused and then we're not focused and then we return and that's okay.
I am, in a sense, relaxing into open awareness of sounds and things like that, but I'm not purposefully directing my concentration, if that makes sense. And instead, like I am trying to stay as open as I can to whatever phenomenon that does arise. But that's interesting, though, that my wording is a little bit different.
I think that's great that you realize that wording maybe doesn't work for you or whatever. Let's use different vocabulary then. So it sounds like what you're talking about is either you're awake or you're not, meaning you're either aware of what's going on or you're not. So my question to you is, what do you do when you realize you checked out? There has got to be times in your practice when you lose your consciousness, right? We all do it. We all get to this point. You can call it whatever you want, but we are not doing whatever it is that we're intentionally doing, even if it's a very natural, easy ease into it. There's times in your practice where you kind of shift out of that. And so I'm curious, what do you do when you shift out of that?
Your thoughts are also in your field of awareness. So you can be aware of your thoughts, but when you identify with the thought, that's how you return back. So then you have to see a thought as a thought. And then when you realize I am thinking or thinking is happening to me, I now return to the other things that are also popping up in the environment because we are people. We do like have a social security number and then all of our previous trauma and conditioning and things that have happened, the filters that we have, your thinking will pull you more than the sound, more than whatever, unless a bomb goes off outside. Then all of a sudden that has every bit of your attention, right? Or if for some reason your foot goes to sleep, it's like nothing else in the world worse has happened to anyone other than this foot that's asleep right now. So those things get the loudest. To me, what I do is I return to the other things that are also happening because my awareness has gotten closed. because of the thinking. And it makes sense why that happens. And so that in turn is part of the practice that I do, but it's so fascinating how that one particular thing about identifying with that thinking pulls everything else out to where you can't focus. So yeah, I have to put that back in a category of sounds, sensations, sights, thoughts. They are all arising. Yeah.
I think that's the point I want to drive home here, is that I believe, and this is just my belief, you might have a different belief, I'd be curious what you think about this, is that the core of our practice really lies in how we handle that situation when we shift out of consciousness, when we shift into autopilot or daydreaming or whatever it is that you want to call it. That's really such a key skill in our practice. And so there's some different ways to handle that. Another way, which is kind of a little bit similar to what you were saying, is the noting, the mental noting, is I will use enough curiosity and investigation to notice what that thought was about and to give it a name. Is that thought about my shopping list, right? So then I might just call it shopping list and then bring myself back to whatever my practice is. My practice is usually paying attention to the sounds or physical sensations in my body, and also doing open awareness, being aware of what these thoughts are just popping in. So that's one, using that noting practice. But some people don't. Some people don't even know what the thought is about that they are, that they kind of lost their consciousness in. And that's fine too. They just notice that they did go into some type of alternate experience and then bring themselves back to something. The other thing that I do sometimes is that self-compassion, giving myself some compassion. So there's different things that you can do when that occurs. But I feel like when people's practices break down, it's because of that, because of the way they're approaching that specific scenario.
So when a person is practicing and they have a goal, which is whatever that means in a meditation practice, right? So the goal is to focus on the breathing, and then the attention gets pulled to your shopping list. How the person handles that scenario is what you're saying is really the make or break point of the practice itself. The goal of the practice is to also notice when you get lost in thought. So that is part of the practice. So the wording around like when it breaks down, it's like, well, I don't know, did it break down? If it's part of the practice, you know what I mean? So it's like just part of the whole, like, oh yeah, so then I'm going to get lost and then I'm going to come back. You know what I mean? But so do you think that though, that like some people get so hung up on the notion of I did something wrong or I am not doing this, and that's the trip up right there? So,
that's one thing that happens. I think there's other things that happen too. I think people don't know what to do. They just get kind of stuck and they have a hard time being aware that that process is happening. I think there's some different challenges.
All of it is the trusting in the moment, not trusting in myself in this moment, but trusting in the moment, and allowing things to just kind of fall as they are. And that's been where I've been, so yeah, like, and I've been there for a while, but I don't know, as far as like advance goes, I feel very much like I have it feels like, I don't know, honestly though, it's like the more that I do it, the easier it gets in a weird way, almost like as a philosophical kind of like underpinning more than just a direct, like, okay, I got lost. It's like where there's these moments of divergence of like, okay, this happened, but then I don't know, you know what I'm saying? I feel like I'm like lost. I've really hijacked this podcast.
Oh, you're doing great. I'm not completely following you in the second, but you've been doing great so far.
Thanks. Yeah. Well, I've had a lot of this stuff I've really wanted to talk about recently, but I don't have anybody to necessarily talk about it with, if that makes sense, like to where it's like no one's doing the practice that I'm doing specifically. So, I'm kind of divulging a bit because it's like I want to kind of talk about it a bit. I'm very excited about it. This is the most excited I've ever been about my practice, if that makes sense.
Oh, good. Yeah. And that's how we met, is you wanted to meet people, you joined the book club, you wanted to meet people to talk about these things. But going back to idea of what do you do when whatever word you want to use, you go into autopilot, you daydream, you lose focus, you are not as conscious. One thing that I've been doing lately, I've switched it up. I like to do different techniques for this. And so the one that I'm using now is I say, I can listen to these thoughts, but I don't have to believe them. Or phrase it as a question. What if I listened to this thought, but I didn't necessarily believe it? That's a surefire way to not identify with your thinking and step back from it. And it's just so freeing and adds so much to your life and to your practice.
If someone's having issues making it consistent, so they read a book, they hired a coach, and the coach said, okay, now practice this many times this week. They got an app, they downloaded it, and they still can't find time to do it. Because I have interesting advice about this that changed recently, but I want to hear what you usually tell people.
I think it's BS if someone says, I don't have time to meditate. And I'll tell you why. Because it's more about routine. So say you have a supplement and you get this new supplement because your chiropractor or your acupuncturist says, hey, you need to take this. And you kind of keep forgetting to take it, right? You've got it there. It's on your dining room table, and 1 out of 3 days you remember to take it, but you forget the other days. You're not taking that supplement because you don't have time. You're not taking it because it's not part of your routine. You don't have a routine for taking a supplement every day. You don't have a specific time of day that you always take your supplement. And so that's really the hang up with meditation is if people think they don't have enough time, it's really they just don't have a routine for it yet. And that takes a good month to just develop a routine. And so start with 5-10 minutes of meditation. You can find 5-10 minutes a day if you make it a routine.
You can go into your phone right now and set your alarm clock for 5 minutes earlier. And that's honest to God how I do it. I go through periods where I am really busy and I'm actually not getting sleep and stuff. And it does happen. And then I just move my alarm clock up 10 minutes. It's the craziest. It's literally the difference between waking up 10 minutes earlier or not. That's it. That's what it comes down to. I think it won't be perfect. You're going to be tired and you're probably going to lose concentration a lot. I do, but it gets done. It happens. And then you know what happens though? If I'm doing it poorly, I still find time to learn more about things like that and keep it in my life outside of that, right? So like right now, I'm going through a great phase of I'm listening to a lot of talks on meditation because I'm meditating in the morning. And I think I'm a little irritated that it's not going very well because I'm so sleepy and I'm just kind of dozing off through a lot of it. So it's like, oh, well, then later in the day, I listen to something. But when it's out of my life, it's like fully out of my life. The fact that you're listening to our podcast means that you have it in your life in some capacity. So you can add a 5-minute practice in pretty easily. If you want to start a practice and you haven't found enough value in it yet, do a half-day retreat in your home. Do that. And then you will see, oh, wow, this feels so good. Or, oh, this feels so bad. I want to improve this. That really reignited my fire. I needed something to really get me back in it. And that was what I needed because it went so poorly. So then I was like fired up. I was like,
right.
I need to practice.
I totally get that.
The Aware Mind podcast is a TSD Mindfulness production. Please visit our website at tsdmind.org. That is T as in tame, S as in soothe, and D as in dwell. Mind as in mindfulness.org. Check out our blog post for this episode with links to supplemental information such as worksheets you can use to put into practice the mindfulness skills shared in this episode. Also, please sign up for our newsletter and receive mindfulness tips. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram at aware_mind_podcast. Thank you.